this evening's meeting of the Carson City Airport Authority to order. And if we could have a roll call, please.
Chair Golden,
Here?
Vice Chair Harris,
Here.
Treasurer Rogers,
Here.
Member Barrett, Member Hamilton, Member Law,
Here.
Member Simmons.
Here.
A quorum's present.
John, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, moving on to approval of the minutes of past meetings of the Airport Authority. Anybody on the Airport Authority have any comments about the past minutes? Anyone? Going once, twice, sold? Can we get a motion to approve those minutes, please?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve our prior minutes from past meetings. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. Modification of the agenda. We reserve the right here to modify the agenda. And what we're going to do is keep the agenda just as it is, with one exception. I'm going to skip over to item F before we go to item E, public comment. And I'd like to present Linda with an award. I'm going to give that to you and thank you for your service to the Airport Authority. I know Ken has something to say, but you know, you should be commended for volunteering your time, and we thank you immensely. Ken?
Well, I don't have anything prepared, Linda, but you know that you were the chair when I first got on the Airport Authority, and you helped provide a very good bridge to onboarding and getting established with both the Airport Authority Board, working with the board, as well as intricacies of the office. And I think you did a yeoman's work in bridging that gap between the previous manager and the board, and being able to keep the airport operating in the manner that it should. And I appreciate it more having experienced that for the last year of what that you must have gone through, including the FAA Part 16 complaint and all that kind of stuff. So I know that you've claimed that you're not going anywhere, and I do have your phone number and your email and I know where you live. So I'm happy to work with you on the desk manual. I know that was one of your objectives, so I've kind of kept that at the top of our list. So thank you very much.
I want to thank each and every one of you for your service on the board as well, the newcomers and those of you who've been on for a while. I honestly believe that this last 4 years has had a lot of good impact on the airport itself, and I do intend to keep my finger close to the pulse, and if there's anything I can do to assist with what I did as chairman or whatever, I am certainly available for that. So thank you again.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll move on to public comment. Any members of the public care to address the board on any non-agendized matters related to the airport? Now would be the opportunity to do so. Go ahead, Dennis.
Good evening. Dennis Jean Greco, Sierra Skyways. I've sent you all an email, and I gave you a packet of all my information that I compiled in the last 3 weeks. That's my proposal. I know it's not for agenda right now, but you guys can read it over. If that's not acceptable, I want to exercise my lease option to return 2 parcels back to the airport since nothing's selling. I would try to keep the land for a year at a reduced rate and see if Ken and I could possibly get another investor in there to build the whole thing out. But that's what I'm proposing.
Okay, understand that we can't,
I know.
comment or
I know,
discuss
just
Okay,
That's
but
fine.
we appreciate your input, and we appreciate the time you've spent addressing it to the authority.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. We will ask for any other public comment, and being that I don't see any other members of the public available to make comment, we're going to move on to item number 1 for discussion and possible action of rescheduling our airport authority meeting dates and time to an earlier start time instead of 6 PM on the third Wednesday of each month.
Thank you, Chair Golden. As you know, we discussed this issue at length at the last meeting and postponed any action on that, and given people an opportunity to digest that and discuss it amongst themselves. I personally think there's a benefit to the organization for having an earlier meeting for a number of reasons. First of all, 6 PM is dinner time, and I think that does impact some of the as we move later into the evening, that it does become an impact to the members. I also think that if we're going to have guests come in and do presentations, that business hours is appropriate for that kind of activity. And I prefer the opportunity to be able to have lengthy discussions without worrying about the clock as far as, my gosh, it's 9 o'clock, why are we still sitting here? And I know one of the things that Chair Golden brought up was to keep the agenda brief, and I I think that that's appropriate, but there may be times when the workload of the board may require us to be here for longer periods. And I think the later you get in the evening, that attention spans wane and become more problematic in that manner. Today, normally, had Supervisor Barrett been here, he would have a turnaround tomorrow morning and be at the Board of Supervisors at 8:30. And I know that that's a quick turn and may result in, hindering both his performance here, but also on the following morning, knowing that he's got to either throw a sleeping bag down on the floor here and just get back up. But I personally believe that there's some value to that, and I don't want to go beyond that discussion. We've mentioned various times, whether it was starting an hour earlier or as early as 4 o'clock. I have looked at the agenda, the room reservation with the city, and there's nothing that would interfere with that. And we could even do it on a trial basis and see how that operated, as opposed to making a big sweeping change. So I think there's some value in that as well. So that's my comment, and I didn't write a board memo on the item.
No board memo needed. I would like to hear from other members of the Airport Authority and also from our legal counsel. I will start with Mr. Hamilton off to my right. Do you have any comment?
No, I guess it'd be nice to have it earlier, but I'm flexible, and so I'll really go with whatever seems to work out better for everybody.
John, what about yourself? What do you feel?
I expressed a small objection last time about the possibility that hindering people from joining the airport authority having to be early, but most of the people who are going to come in onto the authority are going to be from the manufacturing area that's close by, and they're all done at 4 anyhow. So I think that if Ken feels that there's a benefit to starting earlier, there's no reason not to support him.
Bradley, what say you?
I guess I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other. I mean, I think that there may be times when I'll have other things going on and it'll disrupt that. At the same time, I might get more sleep if we have it earlier. So I'm certainly willing to give it a try, see what happens. And I will say, we can always change it back if it doesn't seem to be working.
Clyde, want to weigh in on this one?
Well, for myself personally, it doesn't matter. I can easily accommodate any schedule that's been proposed so far, and I don't really have the experience to know how the public would respond to a time change, so I can't comment on that side of it. So basically, I'll leave it up to Chair Golden, who I think has
Well,
strong
I think
opinion.
Linda can still weigh in.
My concern, I agree with the gentleman to my right that we could do this for a period of time. Excuse me, let me rephrase that. You could do it for a period of time and see how it works out with those people who show interest in attending our meetings. I think other boards and organizations that I have been party to have met during business hours, and I've never seen it be an enormous hurdle over which they couldn't pass. So I would perhaps suggest doing it for a 2 or 3 month period, especially as the days get shorter after the time change and it gets darker earlier. That might be a benefit for some folks who don't drive at night anymore, which we have some of those. So anyway, those are my comments.
I have really rolled this around quite a bit in my mind. And I'm the one who's impacted most because I live the furthest away. But I'm also impacted a lot because as a business owner, I have to attend to business and customers and things of that nature. All of us serve here on a voluntary basis. We're not paid for our time sitting up here. The airport manager serves at the pleasure of the board and is paid for being here in theory. This would be an impediment that I could not overcome, and I would have to step down from the airport authority. When I took this voluntary position, I was asked to do this. I did so based on the schedule. If anyone had said this was going to be a meeting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I would have never volunteered. Never, because that means that my day is over at like 2 for me to get here promptly at 4. That is a huge impediment for me. And that's okay. If the airport authority wants to go in that direction, go in that direction. I ask that you make it happen in January, and I'll resign off the airport authority, effective in our November meeting. I just cannot make that happen for my schedule, and I've thought long and hard about it, and I understand John Barrett's, a little bit of conflict there. Maybe we can move the date as opposed to Wednesday to a different day. That would solve that. I've asked Ken on numerous occasions because we have convened on the matter of making the agenda more concise and getting away from presentations that have limited value and take up significant amounts of our time. Last month, the insurance discussion was a prime example of that. It was not the only presentation we've had this year that went in that direction, and it ate up an hour of our time, and it was a dysfunctional presentation. I think if we worked harder to get things on the agenda that are for decision purposes or items that must be discussed, and kept the presentations to those who are going to present in person whenever possible, I think it would solve a lot of the problem. Keep in mind too, as I am impacted with an early start time, I'm also the last guy to get home. So, because where I live. So I'd like to end earlier too, but starting earlier just doesn't work for my schedule. And, I have a fallback position to that, but I'd also like to hear what our legal counsel has to say, because, of course, this affects him also.
Okay, so I listened to the entire meeting that you guys had last month, and if you think it's difficult being here in the room for 3 hours, try just listening to the meeting for 3 hours. It's brutal. But a couple of observations. But given the comments the chairman just made, I have to say I'm leaning pretty strongly against changing the time. Here are the observations. One, the airport manager is correct when he said last month, I work at the pleasure of the airport authority. I will find a way to fit whatever time you come up with. Keep in mind, though, I give the airport authority an extremely discounted hourly rate. I have pressure from my law firm all the time. get rid of that client and get a client that pays you a regular rate. You've got people waiting in line. Why are you doing this? And so when you move it during the actual regular work hours, you put additional pressure on me. Now, having said that, I would still find a way to make it work if that's the way we needed to go. But I would just ask you to be somewhat considerate of my time as well. Secondly, a comparison was made during that argument to the Reno Tahoe Airport Authority and the Board of Supervisors who meet during the day. I believe those are both paid bodies. I know the Board of Supervisors are paid. If you're going to compare them to volunteer bodies like ours, like the Planning Commission and the Historic Commission and the Cultural Commission and all those things, they meet at night. And they meet at night because they want to make sure they have people that also represent the working people who are, have to work during the day. And while many of you are executives in the working place, like Clyde, who can arrange to get off during the day, there are many people that work that either can't or it would be disadvantageous to their business to do so. So I think you should keep that in mind. And I have to agree with this other observation the chairman just made, which is listening to the insurance presentation, there was some really interesting and educational things in there, but that seemed like a very inefficient way to get that information. It was extremely long. As you know, it lasted over an hour. And I think it could have been sifted down to a presentation that could have been made in about 10 minutes. And then the questions could have come because you guys asked some good questions. And that whole thing could have been done much shorter. And so I think part of it is when there is a proposal to change something or to institute something, a bunch of work should be done up front, and a recommendation and a path should be laid in front of the authority. And that's not true for all things, but for things like that, which are all encompassing, I think it is. I mean, like I said, there was some very educational stuff in there about, what's your insurance liability for a truck? What's your insurance liability if there's a flood? Although I have to say, even though part of the airport's in a floodplain, I've been here since the early 1980s, and we've never had a flood in the area they've marked the floodplain. I think the dynamics of the hydrological dynamics have changed, or maybe the flood study was just wrong to begin with. But when we have floods in Carson City, they're in different places and they're on the edges of the airport, but it isn't, flooding through the floodplain that's marked on the east side of the airport that in theory runs right across the Niner end of the runway. We also have a really big culvert there. And other than some wild animals living in there, I don't think that culvert has ever been full of water. I don't think it ever has. But that aside, that was, those are the kinds of things that are too long. I think we could be more efficient. And so those are my observations. But like I said at the beginning, I serve at the pleasure of this body. If you decide to change the time, I will find a way to make it work. I just would ask you to be somewhat considerate in that respect. And I guess I didn't mention, maybe I did, the observation that Member Rogers made last week was, I think I did mention it was kind of a home run, because we do want to make sure we attract people who have day jobs. And it seems like if you're talking about making it convenient for people to come make presentations to us, every professional has made presentations at night. But people who have day jobs, that's the only time they can show up and give you input. And so I think for those reasons, the nighttime opportunity fits better. That's all I got to say, but thank you.
I do have a follow-up and a couple of things. When I sat on the airport board at the Truckee Tahoe Airport, we used to have our meetings at 9 a.m., and it was really not a good thing. And it was 9 a.m. and by 12 it was done. Eventually, the airport got the hint because they got a lot of complaints from the public. They couldn't attract the right people. And that was a paid position. It wasn't paid much, but you were compensated for it. So it wasn't like you were volunteering your time. They eventually changed that and made it a 5 p.m. start time so that there was participation. and they were having real problems with that. You couldn't get people to sit on that airport board, and people from the community couldn't come in and comment who worked because, well, they worked. And so, I also agree with Ken, and Member Harris has made this comment before, and I agree with it. After about 90 minutes, 2 hours, people's attention span starts to diminish. I agree with Bradley 100%. I agree with Ken. I think the best thing to do is to really focus on keeping the items on the agenda to concise and clear decision-making items, as opposed to shifting the meeting time 2 hours earlier. But, whatever the authority decides to do, whatever you folks decide, I'll work with whatever you have to say. There's a certain point I have to say I can't do it. Clyde?
Yeah, so Chair Golden, I think I heard you propose one option would be to change the day. And that seems to reflect upon my memory on Mr. Barrett saying that the Wednesday evening conflicted with the following Thursday morning meeting. So if we change the day, that could help resolve Mr. Barrett's issue. So I'd just like to make sure we can give that enough consideration.
Yeah, I have no issue changing the day to, for example, Tuesday versus,
I think one of the issues has been availability of the room.
is there no availability on another day?
I think you have to check each time you've got that idea. I remember when we moved, we originally were on Thursday nights and we moved to Wednesdays. And we moved to Wednesday because it was the only other night they had open for us. And then since then, I think the Planning Commission has come in and taken over Thursdays. So, but that's something that certainly the airport manager can find out. And then the other thing too is with the Board of Supervisor members, the Board of Supervisors are each assigned or they volunteer for and they vote on different bodies like the Regional Transportation and all the other bodies. And so depending on who we have on the board, it could impact other nights. As far as I know, tonight is not a night when any of those other boards currently meet. And so tonight, we're safe. I know it's uncomfortable for Member Barrett, and I wish you were here to speak to it directly, to be here and then have to go to the Board of Supervisors meeting at 8:30 tomorrow morning. But if you move it to a different night, you could actually make things much worse. I mean, you'd have to feel that out and the room availability. I guess those are the two factors.
Is this a matter that requires some sort of a motion and approval process by the board?
No, it isn't. It's really something the chairman could do. But because we want to make sure we get as much, participation as possible, it's one that I think you would only want to do after you've got feedback from the other members on the board. And to do that, you have to do it in an open meeting, so.
In the interest of finding a solution that's only mildly disagreeable to all parties, what does everybody think about a 5 p.m. start time? How do the people who are feeling like the early start time is really a detriment to the rest of their life, how does the 5 work for you?
I think for me, 5:30 would be acceptable. 5 would still be somewhat of a struggle. Just saying, I could live with 5:30 pretty easily. What about Steve? Is that?
No, like I said, I will do whatever you guys decide, so 5:30 is okay.
What about room availability too?
When I checked on room availability, it was available like 4 o'clock on, so I don't think that's an issue. And at this juncture, like I say, I serve at the pleasure of the board. If we're going to make a move for a half an hour, that might be of some value to, for example, the Board of Supervisors, whoever, whether it's Mr. Barrett or not, in the future, that might be of value. And I would go with why don't we try it before we commit to it and just see what we think.
You want to try it next month?
Yeah, if that's okay with the board.
Paul, what do you think about that?
I'm pretty well open. I'm kind of more swayed towards a little bit later, but 5:30 is fine with me.
Okay. Bradley, what about you? What do you think about 5:30?
5:30 works for me. I do want to make the point that John is not the only one that starts at 8:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
Amen.
I start at 8 in the morning.
Amen.
I gotta drive home and, yeah, but I typically clear out my schedule the next morning a little bit, but what do you guys think, Linda and Clyde?
I won't be here.
Yeah,
I won't be here, but 5:30 sounds like a good starting point to me to at least make the effort.
5:30 will work fine for me.
doesn't seem like a major decision
No,
here.
it sounds like you guys should try that next month. see
Try it
how
out.
goes,
If
and
it's, if everything, if everybody and everyone's available and the room's available, we could try it out. I certainly would welcome getting home a little earlier than usual. Sure. Yeah.
Let's do it.
Okay. Boy, Bradley, you're pulling the short straw on this one again.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. So we're gonna discuss item number 2 next. Possible action, presentation of draft annual work plan metrics for Carson City Airport Authority. Bradley, you're in charge.
Okay.
I'm gonna use the restroom while you start.
Okay. Well, this is, I hope will be a relatively brief, I'm sorry, let me turn this on. I hope this will be relatively brief, but Ken and I spent some time together on the project plan for the rest of the year. And one of the things we talked about last month was the importance of some metrics. And I resisted the idea that we just kind of wing it for a year. I wanted to get something down. So after looking over this and having a really good discussion with Ken, we came up with an approach that I think works pretty well, particularly considering the restrictions of doing this kind of planning under the open meeting laws. So it's hard to have a sort of back and forth negotiations on what the metrics should be. So what we really focused on was the fact that so much of this work is project-based for the remainder of the year. And projects have milestones, multiple milestones. And so we said, how many milestones, what do we expect to get done in the remainder of the year? And we counted those up and we said, okay, let's say that meeting expectations is hitting N-1. If there are 7 milestones and you get 6 done in the year, then you will have met the expectations of the board. And so when there's a project up there, we came up with what we thought were the milestones for the year. And we counted up and we set a meets expectation level just under getting it all done. And what's the reason for that is that I don't believe that anybody should have to perform at the level of perfection to be seen as meeting expectations. And this is a very full agenda, okay? So that's where we've come to this approach. And in future years, I think we'll have some metrics that we want to use. But I think this is a really good start, particularly considering the restrictions of doing this work in an open meeting setting. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Ken and let him talk through the plan briefly.
Be concise. I gave this a lot of thought as I had a discussion with Vice Chair Harris about this. And we pulled the goals directly from the strategic plan component. And then the initiatives were developed off of that as well. And as I went through this and I finished it off and I shot it off to Vice Chair Harris for his feedback, I went to myself, man, there's a lot here. And especially when you start looking at things like the administrative piece, because that takes a lot of time to develop some of these things, whether it's a through the fence policy is not just simply a one-page document. There's a lot of depth and breadth to that. The desk manual has been, an ongoing project. So there's several things here. Rates and charges are going to take time to develop. But then also, Vice Chair Harris made a point to me that was really good the other day when we talked about trying to grow airport revenue for sustainabody. One of the things has been about this restaurant concept, but are we really ready for that, for a project like that on East College Parkway? We can go out for RFP or Q and get it to public, see if we can get somebody to bite on it. But maybe there's some things that really need to happen on that part of the airport first. For example, the landscaping piece, making it more attractive to a developer, and have some additional data on the viability of that. So looking at this, we're basically through the first quarter of the year, so that really gives us 9 months left. So my biggest feedback request from the board would be to really develop a priority sense on these objectives. I'm fine with the milestones and the measurement concept, but really to decide where do you think the time and energy should really be focused. As I looked at this, some of this is already in progress, like the hangar emergency addressing, for example, the nighttime instrument approach. Moving beyond the current stage on some of these is really the next step forward. The issue like an all-terrain runway we can get some guidance on that pretty quickly with our engineering team. The feasibility study, where we for commercial air service, is that something that really should be on the front burner, or is that something that we kind of simmer and we keep proceeding on a steady course with? The public events, that kind of stuff is ongoing. The appearance of the airport, that's kind of something I think that should be near the top of our objectives. So I feel comfortable with this approach. I think you've given us the tools, the Airport Authority Board's given me some tools to help improve some of these items, whether it's growing based aircraft and being able to get some development going forward. On the administrative piece, I've got something I'd like to bring up here when I get to the manager's report about assisting in that. So I'm looking forward for some feedback on that end, and that's all I have on that.
Are there any comments? Member Law.
I do have a question on the portion that says maintain positive relationships with the community and hosting monthly aeronautical and other public events. Does that include the CAP meetings and that sort of thing that are already on schedule?
That, pathways to aviation, like, for example, we hosted NNDA right after the board meeting last month. But just, increasing the continued bringing people onto the airport that normally aren't there. For example, I just met with the Chamber of Commerce a couple of weeks ago about them hosting their 75th anniversary event at the terminal building next year in June. So I think those kind of activities where you're bringing out, I think for the NNDA, Member Rogers was there. There were probably 65 to 85 people over the period of two and a half hours that generally don't come to the airport. And so I think those kind of items would fall on that list.
Okay, that was exactly what I was looking for, because I think the more people we get out and make them aware of where we are and who we are and that sort of thing, the better off we are. I think that's a great deal.
I'd like to say I caught a whole lot of positive feedback about the condition of the terminal building. When I went to the NNDA meeting, which was gratifying, that we've been sort of chipping away at that, and people were like, "Oh, wow, look at this space. This is such a nice space," and I haven't heard that in the past.
I think I'm hearing Ken make an ask for the for us to prioritize these items for him. And if that's the case, I would suggest that the board does that individually and submits those to Ken and let Ken simulate all that information and present it back at the next board meeting as to what the typical prioritization of these items would be. And I do challenge a little bit on the proposal, and maybe it was just an example, but I think it would be pretty aggressive to say a success for Ken would be hitting 6 out of these 7. That's quite, there's a lot of work here, so I would suggest we make that a little less. But
Paul Hamilton, I think last time we did have some priorities established, I think, by the color chart, if I remember correctly.
This is where this information came from.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that seemed like that's a start. And this is incredibly ambitious to try and get through everything. So that's why you want to get some priorities going here, which is,
And I just, Paul, I will just open up the question now. Is there anything on here you see that you go, put it in the next year? I mean, that would be the best outcome. Yes, sir.
Okay, I got.
Member
comment.
Golden.
Comment, maybe question, I don't know. Again,
Yes.
I've deferred this to you, so I need to understand where we're at on this. Maybe what I'm reading here is very specific as opposed to a more global concept, if you will. But one of the things that I really think that our manager needs to focus on in general terms is growing the customer base. And I think that's critical to the airport. So is that, I mean, we have a lot of specificity here. Is that growing the customer base addressed in here, in your opinion? Because I question that. It seems like we're kind of on the fringe on a few of these items, but boy, I think that there is no, there's no substitute for that. That needs to be priority number one.
I mean, I agree that there's nothing on here that says grow the user base. Sorry. There's nothing on here that says specifically grow the user base. I think we touch on it when we say that we want to move forward with a feasibility study on the commercial passenger service because that would increase users. And we do talk about increasing lease revenue. I mean, specifically, I don't know if that would be more users. That would be one route to it. I would entertain a proposal that says increase users by this much. The problem that I see right now is I'm not sure how to count users where we are today. Is it the number of people that come through the door? That's, they use the place because they open the door. Is it the number of flights in and out? Is it the number of people that are domiciled or planes that are domiciled? I don't really know how to count it.
Under maintain financial stability, I think that really is captured in increased aircraft property tax revenue because the idea being that we're trying to grow base aircraft. And so the growth in lease, so a new lease for whether it's a lease of additional space on the airport beacon for a cell tower, whether it's land revenue. Now that we've finished the master plan, we've kind of we've got the development concept in place and how we can go about approaching that. The airport making hangar ground available. In the case of Mr. Greco, he's got 2/3 of his hangar still to fill. So being able to attract the customer that product fits is one example of that as well.
Let me just make a comment because I agree with what you're saying, that all those things are pointed toward increasing users. I also hear what Member Golden is saying, that, hey, let's increase users. Let's get directly to it. Again, I'd like to hear from from you, Mr. Golden, what that measure should be.
You know, we've talked about that metric before,
Okay.
okay? And what I said is not increase users, but increase the exact words I've used are customer base. So that means, and again, we've talked about that, more utilization of the airport, more landings, more aircraft based at the airport, greater hangar occupancy. One of the metrics that we had discussed that isn't, sure fail, but it's something that can be looked at, is the fuel flow fee. In theory, more planes coming in means more planes buying fuel. In theory, not necessarily practice. We've talked about all those things. And again, we're nibbling at the fringes of this when you look at, for example, the nighttime approach. Okay, that would, in theory, increase the customer base. But I'm saying, do we need a specific line item for this, with a goal of increasing the customer base? Because that is really, as I see it, something that's critical to the well-being of the airport in general terms.
Paul Hamilton, I think one of the ways to do that is pretty simple, is through revenues in one form or another. We've got revenues in all these different columns. Now, how do those progress over time? Fuel flow is one of them. Hangar leases is another. So it seems like that would be a good, simple measurement technique that we've got right here in front of us that we can just look at. And I would almost assume that the greater revenue we have, the greater customer base.
Well,
okay, or how do we?
Yes, but no, not necessarily.
How do we correlate?
Yeah, because what happens if fees are raised or rents increase based on CPI? It's not correlated necessarily in that means.
Any other comments regarding this fascinating discussion?
I really like Chair Golden's comment about having some outcome-based metrics, not all project-based metrics. I think that's very valuable concept and it should be incorporated. I'd like to talk also about prioritization. It seems to me like if we wanted to set a standard for our manager to work to, well, we should have a percentage of these goals that are requirements. The first four on the list, or these first four on the list from a priority standpoint, those are mandatory in order for you to be performing acceptably. You have to hit those four goals, and then have a reduced standard for the rest of the goals. So that we when we set our priorities, we make it clear to Ken what we want them working on. So that, in combination with some outcome-based metrics, I think we got ourselves a nice solid system.
I don't disagree with what you're saying, and I am a metrics guy. I do think that we will struggle to do that considering the limitations of the open meeting law. We could keep in mind that we approved 2 months ago, we approved the general plan. A month ago, we approved this year's stuff, and now now we have the metrics. So how many months do we want to use to set this program? So I will entertain any addition or subtraction from the goals in the discussion today. Or I guess I will entertain a motion that we talk about this again in a month after we have a chance to look at this. I don't think it moves us forward. And I would like to recognize our attorney.
I just wanted to point out that last month you approved priorities for each of these items. They're the same items. I just asked Ken to put that up on the screen. And so from the standpoint of prioritizing different things, you've done that. Now, I totally respect what Member Harris is saying, which is now we're not just talking about what you're going to do. We're now talking about the metrics of how we measure your performance. But those two should be in sync. And so it kind of seems like you've already done the priority part. The part that's left to do is the part Member Harris started out with, which is, okay, then how do we transform this into metrics for performance? And I heard a bunch of discussion, but then it seemed like we kind of went sideways and started discussing changing the priorities, which, certainly you have the ability to change the priorities, but it seems like that's something that you've already accomplished. We're trying to get through the next step, which Member Harris is presenting, which is, okay, how do we transform that into metrics so we can see a performance? One other observation too is it's great to have this great quantitative measures, but I think we all recognize at some point we have to have some subjective levels. If he accomplishes one thing on there that we thought was really hard to do, we're going to want to give him more credit than doing two that were, almost automatic. They were so easy. And so at some point, when you get through this, you should still have metrics as Member Harris has designed, but I think you want to also recognize that there are some of these tasks are a lot harder than other ones. If he's able to get that nighttime approach in a quick fashion, that would be like totally amazing. I mean, it's unrealistic that it could happen in a short time frame, and so if he was able to accomplish it, I think you would want to reward him as a performance metric. But and I just throw those thoughts out just because I hate to see you spinning around on changing priorities unless that's really what you want to do.
I think this discussion is totally my fault. Because all I did is I concur with the plan as we laid out. This is the packet from last month. And so these initiatives that you see here are here. And this is what the board and Chair Golden asked Member Harris to do with me, is to come up with the performance plan. And that's what we did. And so when I sent us off on this rabbit hole, it was more like, okay, if you're looking at these that we have in front of us, which of these would you latch on as the most important of those? But I think that's a rabbit hole, so let me withdraw that request.
I will entertain a motion from a member of the authority to accept the proposed set of metrics that the airport manager sent out. Do I have a motion?
I would make that motion, but I would also comment that what I see on here is what I expected to see. Some of these, as Mr. Takis suggested, should be weighted more than others, and I think that this general outline is what we will task him with. Once he makes his manager's report each month, those things can be marked off, and the priorities can be elevated on one portion or another so that he knows from us what we see as the more critical of those remaining items.
That sounds brilliant. So could I get a motion?
I just did. I move that we accept this list, subject to change as things are accomplished and the board give direction to the manager on things that should be weighted more heavily from time to time.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
I would like to take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Don't you
All-
have discussion or public?
Oh,
Any public
discussion.
comment?
Discussion or
public comment. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. I think the motion passed.
Thanks, Bradley.
I will now turn this marvelous gavel back over to the man who owns it.
I don't own it, just borrowing it.
Can we have a break?
Yeah, we're gonna have a 5-minute break. We'll reconvene at 6:55.
Thank you.
is informational, renaming the Carson Airport, Carson City Lake Tahoe Airport to take advantage of the name recognition of Lake Tahoe. And Ken, would you talk to us about that?
Thank you, Chair Golden. As you know, this came up on our strategic planning process and discussion. And it has been pointed out to me that there are, that Lake Tahoe branding has been used at multiple airports in the area, starting with Minden Tahoe, Truckee Tahoe, and then Reno Tahoe International Airport. And those have all been renamed from their previous name. Reno used to be called Reno Cannon, for example.
That's right.
Minden was just Minden Airport, Minden Douglas County, I think, and at some time it was also called Ferris Wheel. So,
Ferris wheel's actually,
That's a different
oh,
airport.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
Ferris wheel's actually out in Wellington.
wrong one. Yep.
Marias, I think.
And then also Truckee Airport was, Truckee Tahoe Airport was Truckee Airport at one point in time.
I don't think so, but I don't know.
It hasn't always been Truckee Tahoe. I know that change has taken place.
Yeah, the district has always been Truckee Tahoe Airport
Or
District.
district, right.
Yeah, that was established before the airport was ever there.
Well, yeah, there's like 9 airports in California that are airport districts.
That's one of 9, exactly.
So the long story short of it was that one of the opportunities through the strategic planning surveys and discussions was how to better market or position the Carson City Airport for marketing purposes. And being that it is technically one of the closer airports to drive to the lake, especially to the east shore, certainly, is closer than Reno Tahoe, certainly, and is, I think there probably could be some Google mapping done to determine how close it is with Minden Tahoe as the example. But I think 50 is a much better roadway than Kingsbury Grade, certainly. And the other aspect is, there's a great photo, I'm sure you've seen it, of the city of Carson looking looking west from the east, and Lake Tahoe is just above the rim. And it's a beautiful shot, and I think that would bode some interest in that. Obviously, we're not going to make a motion here tonight on that. I think the ask going forward is to do some research on this and maybe even do some stakeholder outreach and see if there's a value. The current FAA name for the Carson is Carson Airport. It's not Carson City Airport. And the reason I made the suggestion of adding the term Carson City Lake Tahoe Airport is it does separate it a little bit from the other airports around that just add the lake to the end of the name, and does specify more geographically what it is defining, which is the state capital, Carson City, and there is a Carson Airport in Southern California. And so hard to confuse the two, but people have done it. They look through their FMS. Next thing you know, they're plugging in the wrong identifier. And they're still 300 miles from their destination. But I think there may be some marketing value to it, but obviously it does need some community outreach, whether it's the tourist bureau, the state, city governments, local community. There may be some identification with that we can help determine whether or not there's some value in that. And so based on that, it was included on the agenda as an informational item so that there won't be any hand-wringing tonight, and allow some strategic planning on that as whether or not that's a move we even want to consider.
Well, with that in mind, I don't see anyone from the public who wants to initially speak to the matter. Clyde, what do you say about it? What do you think?
One question that I do have would be, I can't answer, I don't think we can answer tonight, but how does it impact businesses that have literature that's associated with the current name of the airport? Would this then ultimately force them to change some of their marketing resources?
I'm sure there are some out there, but we also have the Carson Tahoe Hospital, which is right across the road. And if we just use that as a name for the airport, I thought that might create some minor confusion and misunderstanding. But Marketing materials are generally updated routinely, in a period of time. Nobody buys, a lifetime supply of whether it's brochures or magnets, but they may have an investment in some printing material. I haven't, gone through the Visitor Bureau as part of the outreach, could be looking through the various literature that's there that they hold on to, as well as the Chamber of Commerce, and see what the community utilizes on that end as far as the name is concerned.
Is there any businesses directly associated at the airport that would use or be forced to change their name? Is there any businesses that tie in the name?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of any. I know that Sport Aviation advertises its flight training over the lake and uses some of that in its literature. And I'm sure Member Hamilton could speak more to that. But off the top of my head, I can't think of anybody.
Linda?
One of the things that I was thinking about with this is historically with the companies I've worked for, every time we went out for printing of a brochure type thing, we made changes. But my concern is we would change the name that was known publicly, but CXP would still be the identifier, correct?
That's correct. I spoke with Kurt Halkel, who's the aviation planner for the state, about what the name change process would be, and it's actually very simple. But the three-letter identifier, now the ICAO identifier, those wouldn't change. It would still be ICAO identifiers KCXP, and then the truncated version is still CXP.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So it wouldn't, you wouldn't need a new Jepson manual. You'd just go to CXP and there you are.
And then when they printed the updated sectionals and departure plate and arrival plates, those would all be updated on, I think they're every 90 days, if I'm not mistaken. So those would be updated in the facility directory. The 5010 record would be updated. All those kind of flight aware, all that kind of stuff would be.
Do you know where that photograph that you're talking about can be obtained?
It's on our website.
Understand, but do we have the rights to use it?
Yeah, I've got it. I actually got it from the city. So,
Bradley?
My only comment is that there'll be some cost to the airport to make a change, whether it's updating the website, it's doing a few things here and there. And so we should think about a budget for it and have some idea what the cost might be. I know it won't be a lot, but it's a question we should ask.
I'm a supporter of this change.
Paul Hamilton, I'm a supporter of the change. I could go into a lot of reasons if we want that, but if everyone's in favor of generally going ahead, then you won't have to sit through that. I do have the comment of with the FAA, it's Carson Airport. Okay, we've been calling it Carson City Airport forever. Okay. And and I would hope that when we put it on the FAA charts, it would be Carson Tahoe, and that we would maybe continue to keep it as, and that as we've been calling it Carson City Airport, we call it Carson City Lake Tahoe. I just think Carson City Lake Tahoe is too long to put on the FAA chart. So that's it's almost renaming it twice. One officially with the FAA, and then what we call it now.
Personally, if you're going to change the name, you change the name. But I'm not saying that that's the final name anyway, because we may do some outreach and we'll get some feedback from the community and figure out whether there's other suggestions. But if you look at most airport names, for goodness sakes, they've now added some, Hawaii is, now the Daniel Inouye International Airport. They've all gone through some iteration of name change over time. I don't think it's unusual for there to be a name change. I personally would, in my opinion, Carson Tahoe I refrain from because it's descriptive for neither. And now we're also calling it the same as the hospital across the road. So if you're going to be descriptive, I don't think Carson City Lake Tahoe is any more cumbersome than saying Reno Tahoe International Airport, for example. And they changed the font, I think.
So I had a,
Okay, it just seems a little too many words for the FAA charts, that's all.
I got a few comments on this, and I guess to summarize, I've moved from being opposed to this to being somewhat ambivalent, so the needle has moved a little bit. And I had a conversation with Paul earlier in the week over the phone, and we talked about this at length, and he moved me a little bit in the direction. I hear what everybody else is saying, and you guys are all, kind of ratifying what Paul had said, and I have my own opinion. I want to share it. But before I do, let me state that the input that we're going to really need to get is from our hangar tenants. That's critical. And I want to hear from Steve also as a pilot and tenant on the airport tonight. But I've always been of the opinion that the airport is in Carson City, and Carson City has its own uniquity and its own identity outside of Tahoe. Yes, it is the second closest airport to the lake by car, besides Lake Tahoe Airport. I mean, it's close. I mean, I drive it all the time from the, Spooner down to the bottom of the hill is 9 miles. That's pretty close, and Spooner's a much better road than Kingsbury, as Ken stated. But I've always felt that Carson City has its own good identity as the state capital that we should capitalize upon. That's just my opinion. I'm one of a number up here, and like I said, I'm kind of ambivalent. I could go either way on this. I'm not digging heels in any one direction. I always wondered too why on the charts it says Carson Airport, but everybody refers to it as Carson City Airport. Now we know why. Because everywhere you look, it says Carson City Airport, except on the damn charts. So, like I said, I could be swayed in any direction here. I almost feel as if, I am literally dead center on this. But Steve, what's your opinion?
Well, I don't know that there's a real legal issue here, and certainly I think it makes sense to change it to at least to the Carson City Airport, since that's what it's called. But I do have to share with you that when Minden changed their name from Minden Douglas County to Minden Tahoe, most of the pilot community here thought that was the cheesiest thing they'd ever heard, because there is a true Lake Tahoe airport that's at Lake Tahoe. And so it almost feels like it's a feeble attempt to trade off of somebody else's identity. Now, I say that because that's the kind of feedback I heard on the airport here when that happened. I don't know if people still feel the same way. I certainly understand that if there's marketing or economic potential, it should be considered. But I just thought I would share that with you. And I'm kind of the same mind as the chairman, which is Carson City has a unique identity, and it has its own draw, and people know it's right next to Lake Tahoe. All you got to do is look at a map. And so, I don't know that you need it in the name. Maybe, it's, for you guys to decide, or maybe there's a clever way to use it in conjunction with marketing or something. But certainly wouldn't spend a lot of money on it. I would definitely look into it and get feedback, not just from the user community, but also from the businesses that are around, because I'm sensitive to the businesses that promote their product, and they promote it, and they may promote it in conjunction with Lake Tahoe, I don't know. But I would get their feedback too.
I want to give a little, just a brief historical perspective on the airports. Lake Tahoe Airport is Lake Tahoe Airport because it's at Lake Tahoe. There's only one airport in the entire basin. That's it. Truckee Tahoe Airport has always been Truckee Tahoe Airport District. As long as I've known, which is going back 35 plus years, it's been Truckee Tahoe Airport. Now, the reason, and there is historical reason why they have the word Tahoe in the name, is because it is an airport district, And the property owners, every property owner in that geographical district pays into the airport. And so, believe it or not, 60% of the property tax revenue for the airport in Truckee, which, by the way, is not in the town of Truckee. People don't know that either. It's in two different counties. It's in Placer and Nevada County. But 60% of the revenue, property tax revenue, comes from Lake Tahoe. So they felt it was important for the taxpayers to give them that identity. And the district is huge. The district runs, I believe, from as far south as Bliss State Park, all the way north to Sierra County, all the way east to the Nevada state line, all the way west to Nyack. And I think it goes as far as Blue Canyon. So that's why they have Tahoe in their name. They actually have a legitimate right to it, or they felt actually they needed to appease the taxpayers, was really what it was. So just some historical perspective. Hold on a second. I know Linda had a comment.
This is just a flippant comment. We could just as easily call it the Carson City Ponderosa. And people would know exactly where you were talking about. Sorry.
I know older people would know exactly.
And we do have a historical connection because Carson City was in that Ponderosa map.
That's right.
If you looked at the map on the TV program, that little point that went up to the lake, that's where we connected to the lake and still do. But anyway.
Paul?
Okay, well, I was hoping we were going to avoid this. But let me tell you a story of how I got here, why I'm sitting in this chair, why I'm operating in Carson City. The economy went bad. I actually thought I was going to have to get a real job for my engineering consulting. I ended up in Hawaii, flying people around. We had 4 trikes flying full-time there. After I went over for 2 weeks, I ended up being 5 months over there. And finally I said, I just can't live on this island. I just can't live on that, great paradise. But, and so my wife and I were over there and we decided, well, let's do this somewhere. So we started looking at all the numbers. Where are what do we need? A tourist place, it's got to be beautiful, it's got to be reasonably good weather, on and on and on. We, Southern California, didn't want to live there. Number of other places. We finally figured out that we were going to do it in Napa Valley. Perfect situation, balloons, tourists, the whole thing. So we had it all set up. I spent six months of my life setting that whole business up. We went down to the everything was all ready except for we went down to the airport board of directors. One of them didn't want it, and that cut that whole thing. So our backup was Carson City, mainly because of the numbers. How much money is flowing in from tourism? It's all about the numbers, and you get a certain percent of that for that. So based on that, we decided, well, let's do it here. So here we are.
And we're glad.
And it's basically all about the numbers at Tahoe. Huge tourist industry, great income. I mean, it's a spectacular market. So that's essentially how I got going with this, the hang gliding Tahoe service that we do. Booming business, doing great, Tahoe. Another part of this is when people call me up for flight lessons, a lot of times Nevada, they're all over the country. And they say, yeah, well, we're thinking of coming out to Vegas, and so we'll just drop by. I said, wow.
We get that all the time.
It's nowhere near Vegas. We're closer to San Francisco. And yes. And we say, but we're right next to Tahoe. Oh, Tahoe. I tell you what. Let me talk to my wife, and we'll see if we can go on vacation. We come in there, and we can do part of your flight school. Total change of mind when the airport's associated with Tahoe. And so the other thing is too, when we look at, if we look at our Reno Tahoe, Nevada Territory Tourism, Commission on Tourism, we look at how have things changed since 2003? Why do people come to Nevada? Okay. What are the primary source of information used by visitors? Okay. Basically, back in 2003, travel apps, 1.8%, now 5.7. Now, why am I giving these numbers? Travel app is because of keywords. We all live
He sold me.
by key words.
I know.
Tahoe.
He sold me on the phone on Monday. That's why I said he moved the needle.
Well, no, okay, and okay, what are some of the top Nevada activities? Mountains, back in 2003, 9.5, 15% in 2017. Parks and resources, it was 2013, 7.4, 11. Tourism is growing towards the mountains.
Well, if you didn't
Okay.
know, Paul, I don't want to interrupt, I must say, because we did a lot of this research years ago. Maybe no one in this state knows this. Well, no one in this room knows this about the state. Nevada, as it ends up, is the most mountainous state in the union.
Yes.
See, so you knew.
17 mountain ranges.
Yeah, there
Range
are,
after
there are
range.
more mountains and mountain ranges in this state than any other state. Makes Colorado look like nothing. And you think around here, you ought to fly out to the Rubies and see what goes on out there. That's why you're getting all the mountain tourism.
Well, okay, yeah, and I understand, parks, recreation areas, state park, yeah, all that's going on. But it does relate to Tahoe, and then we also get into what are the five primary purposes, trip to Nevada, from 3% to 6% in those years there. So Nevada, so we're growing towards recreation, and how can Tahoe be, or how can Carson be part of that? Another newest used best places to visit in the USA, we can see we've got Grand Canyon, Yosemite, Yellowstone, Maui, Glacier National Park, New York City, San Francisco, Washington DC, Hawaii, Telluride, Jackson Hole, Lake Tahoe, number 12. Tahoe is the priceless keyword to basically grow our customer base. If we want to grow our customer base, which I think we all want to do, I think that's important. Then if we include Tahoe in our search results,
He is, yeah.
That's gonna be-
So let me make a suggestion.
Big
We're not
help.
making a decision on this tonight. Okay, this is just for information. Paul, you've done a fantastic job. Again, you moved the needle with me, which says a lot. Okay, you got to do something to move the needle with me, and you did. Maybe what we should do is direct our manager to pursue this a little further and see where it goes. Would that be acceptable to the airport authority? Show a thumbs up, maybe? Yeah? Yeah? Okay.
And run it by our tenant base.
Yeah, that's critical. And I do understand why everybody felt it was kind of cheesy when Minden did that, but whatever. Minden doesn't have its own
Well,
identity.
we're as cheesy as Minden.
No, we don't want to go
we
there.
could be cheesier.
Okay, so if it's okay, we're gonna wrap that discussion up with, any comments from the public? Didn't think so. Okay. Item number 4 for discussion and possible action, we have a lease amendment for Sacramento Valley Limited Partnership, which is Verizon Wireless, for additions and improvements, equipment modifications. It's a cell phone tower lease. Ken, could you walk us through that?
Sure. Our Verizon Wireless lease actually comes up for renewal next year anyway, and it's an automatic renewal every 5 years, and it came up in July of 2019 for the automatic renewal. They are going to relocate their equipment from its present position on the tower up to the very top. Now, shortly after they had made that request to the airport, I received a call from another potential tenant, or I should say lessor on the airport beacon, and that is T-Mobile. So Verizon was kind of dragging their heels as far as getting back, and I said, hey, look, you're number one on the position because you called first about it, so, let me know what you guys are gonna do. And so they said, well, no, we'll get this thing moving. And so T-Mobile is happy they would like the top spot, but they're happy to move into the vacated position by Verizon. So this is kind of triggering two actions. One is a potential new lessor on top of it, and the lease will be very similar to what AT&T and Verizon is. It'll have an automatic 3% annual CPI increase. They're going to proposing similar to them. They'll have the same restriction on making sure their equipment doesn't interfere with the equipment that's currently there. Council Takis knows way more about this particular background on Verizon. They've been a great tenant. Check shows up every month. They take care of their equipment. So I think this is really an easy move for the board to approve that over the next 5 years, we're going to collect $120,000 from them.
So that's the fiscal impact is 120,000 additional or
Plus the
continuation?
compounding effect of 3% over that. The base just now alone, if we took the 24,190 over 5 years, it comes out to 120, 952, and then if, of course, you compound.
And what are they
3%
paying us right now?
As of July, they started paying us 2015, 87 a month. So it's 24,000 a year.
Okay, what were they paying us in June?
Was 3% less. So
Okay.
1,900
So we're
and
same
some
basic
change,
rate,
yeah,
we're just
1980.
continuing on. Okay.
Yeah.
Steve?
Yeah, I just thought I'd give you some background. That's accurate. And one of the things that we're seeing in the telecom industry right now is we're seeing a lot of antenna companies upgrading, or cell phone companies upgrading their antennas to try and position themselves for 5G. And so they're adding frequencies, and that's one of the things that they're doing here. And they're moving their equipment to spots on the tower that are optimized for that. The background of the tower is kind of interesting because we had a beacon tower here in the Carson City Airport. And I was approached a long time ago by AT&T, who said, hey, do you think we could hang some towers, some antennas on your beacon tower, and we'd be happy to pay you a monthly rent. And we looked into it. The FAA said that's fine as long as it's structurally okay. So I negotiated a lease with them at the time on behalf of the airport that said, yeah, you can do it. And I don't remember what the original rate was, but if the tower's not structurally sufficient, you can't put it on our tower, but we'll let you build us a new tower that's structurally, strong enough to handle at least 4 sets of antennas and our beacon tower. And lo and behold, they came back with their structural study and said, yeah, your tower's not strong enough. We're going to build you a new tower. So they built us the new tower, and we gave them their choice of any place they wanted to be on the tower, which interestingly enough, their engineering studies showed at the time, it was not at the top. It was like the second position down, so there was room for somebody above them. And now with 5G and some of these other frequencies changing, up there is really pretty good. So Verizon's smart enough to say, okay, look, this would be good for us. And so that's where they're moving. I do have to tell you one funny side story, though. When we moved the tower, we moved it farther from the runway because we actually were starting to see that we had a Part 77 airspace. We were right on the edge of the Part 77 airspace. We were thinking, we're supposed to have that clear. So we moved it a little bit further away. Well, shortly after we got the new tower up, I was visiting an elderly client who lived in the mobile home park across the street. And at night, you thought you were in like a concentration camp. The light would just kind of come sweeping through there. And I saw that and I was going, oh my God, these people must feel terrible. We went back and of course we re-aimed the light because there was no reason for the light to go down through their mobile home park. The idea is for us to all be able to see the light from the air. It's the upper part. So we readjusted the light so it didn't do that. But that's kind of the story between our tower. Now, since then, we have attracted 3 other companies to be on the tower, and we've gone through various changes with some of them. The biggest one, I think, that was going the other direction was when we had our last airport manager. Somebody came in and said, oh, we're going to just terminate our lease and we're going to leave you the equipment. And we said, no. You guys are going to come clean it all out, including any, potential hazardous materials and everything else. And ultimately, they ended up paying us some money and taking all of their stuff out to get off the tower. So we actually do have one spot that is still open. And so if T-Mobile comes through and they want to get on it, that's easy money for the airport.
Does AT&T still have antennas on it?
They do. They
Okay.
do. And from time to time, we will get people contacting us saying, oh, I'm here talking to you on behalf of AT&T. We really need to renegotiate our lease. We can't afford to keep paying this amount. And every time I've checked with AT&T, I know their counsel on a first-name basis because I've been doing telecom law for so long. And I'll call them, they'll check into it and find out it's not a representative of theirs. It's one of these guys that go out and they try and negotiate something, and then they turn around to the carrier and say, oh, AT&T, we can sell you a better deal. Pay us some money, and we'll be able to get you this kind of discount. And so we've run into those kinds of people quite a bit. So when we get contacted, one of the things that I'm always telling the airport managers, let's make sure it's really somebody authorized on behalf of the carrier to talk to us. Otherwise, we're probably spinning our wheels. But the T-Mobile people are real. I checked on them.
Okay.
And the Verizon people have been great to work with. AT&T's been great to work with. Cricket was good while they lasted. I can't remember, who's our fourth? Sprint. Sprint, well, yeah, they're merging. Yeah, their merger is being approved.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
have 4 carriers. Anyway,
I have nothing to add or talk to you about this. Anyone have any comments from the airport authority? Clyde?
Yeah, I have, I apologize for not being able to research this a little bit more before this came up for discussion tonight. But I wanted to run this by our IT department at ClickBond because we recently ran into some issues with our Wi-Fi communication because we communicate up and down from the east end of Lockheed to the west end and back and forth. And we ran into some issues with overcrowded communications interfering with our systems. So I wasn't sure when I saw this on the agenda if these are frequencies that would continue to complicate things for people around the airport. I was hoping to get some background on that from our IT department. Highly likely not a problem because likely it's at different frequencies, but I was hoping maybe somebody here might have some experience around that and could comment.
I can respond a little bit to that because I've talked to your IT guy, not about this most recent change, but I've told them several times that if they need a link on the tower to get to your other campus building, the one that's out on Fairview or wherever it is, that I think we can accommodate them on the tower to do that. He didn't mention to me that they were having interference issues. For him, it was just trying to find a solution to be able to get to the other building with a good high-speed connection. But I thought you guys hooked into a fiber. You guys have a really good fiber connection right now. And so I don't know how that's terminating at your other campus. I kind of got the impression, even when we were doing the North Ramp work and you guys were laying your new fiber in, I got the impression that you guys had solved that with a fiber connection, which of course would be far superior to any kind of antenna over the air connection. But yeah, I'm not aware of any interference issues. The other thing is, everybody who goes on the tower and changes their antennas, they have to clear the interference issues with all the other carriers up there. And so it seems to me, once you clear it with all those guys, you probably aren't going to be interfering with anything else. And of course, AT&T they have to all clear it with AT&T first because AT&T was there first, but they basically have to clear it with anybody who was there ahead of them. And they all see, the amazing thing is, unlike lawyers who get together in a room representing these telecom companies, the engineers get together and they're all solution oriented. They just sit down and say, hey, what can we do? Here's the problem. How do we fix it? And they all put their minds together to find a solution, unlike many of the meetings I've been in where the lawyers are all just battling for position. And so I'm not aware of any interference issues, I guess is my short answer to your question.
Well, thanks for the information that you provided. Just to clarify, we did put a loop around, so our main campus is connected by fiber underground. But down on the east end of Lockheed, we have another facility down there that isn't connected to the main campus. We communicate to that campus, that building, by Wi-Fi, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, PCC Structurals is doing the same thing. And we did have to change our frequency recently because of some interference.
One thing you should know, though, is you guys are using unlicensed frequencies, and these telecom companies have to use FCC licensed frequencies. So theirs shouldn't interfere with yours. Yours, because they're unlicensed frequencies, you got to deal with any other yahoos that are out there that are using similar frequencies.
Great catch, and I do remember that being stated, so that's what I needed to hear right there. Thanks.
John?
I think this is great, easy money for the airport, and I'm also been reading about 5G coming along and the need for an immense number of small antenna sites in order to support autonomous vehicles, so on and so forth. So I think we ought to just keep our ear to the ground. I mean, maybe there's room to build a few more towers on airport property to support the 5G rollout, so we shouldn't miss them if that was available.
Well, does anyone here on the Airport Authority want to move to accept this amendment? Linda?
I recommend approval of the Verizon Wireless lease agreement.
Anyone want to second that? Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any comment from the public? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Airport engineers report, included in the packet.
I'm sure you've had an opportunity to look at that. Real quick, the ADO provided us with a go letter for planning for the fence project for the next fiscal year. And then but that was the only thing that was on the letter. And I went back and I said, yeah, you guys were talking about adding another grant to that. And they went, oh, yeah, that's right. Well, we'll send you another one. So they ended up sending another one and then adding the snow equipment removal building. And I went, when we're doing that, we got to do the AWAS at the same time because it's going to the same area. And they said, oh, we'll go back and we'll amend that. And then I said, we should really get the pavement on a schedule. And the runway hasn't been done in a while. So maybe we should talk about that. And they came back and they said, So they gave us a go letter that included those 3 projects for next year. The AWAS relocation actually wouldn't happen until the year before, so we're doing because it's part of the project of putting the SRE building in, they're gonna do the category exclusion for the environmental in the same time because it's a connected project. So those are all gonna be lumped together and they should be approved by the date is like December, the final date has to be like December 27th or some weird number. So those are in process. The other piece that we're still working on about the fence project is the culverts, because we could secure all that north property and get all this barbed wire up and whatnot, but if we can't secure those culverts, then the airport's not secure, because you could just come down that way very easily. So that's one thing we're working on with the engineer, looking at different product. The FAA also did approve wildlife fencing, and we found a product at one of the conferences where it's much less expensive to install, and it's also easier. For the wildlife fencing that they have now is like a 10-foot chain link that gets buried in the ground from the bottom of the fence. Well, this new stuff actually attaches to the bottom of the fence and goes straight down into the ground, and it's like about an 18, 24-inch wire, and it's a super efficient product. So that was another benefit of going to one of those conferences, and the FAA bought into that right away. They like that product, so you'll probably see more of that. The one thing hanging out here that's mentioned at the bottom is the supplemental appropriation that we applied for the purchase of the acreage of being the airport. That's going to be announced sometime in the near future. I'm not highly optimistic about that because I just don't think that project scores well. So we're going to keep our eye out for any future additional funding. I just saw the House passed a bill that's going to the Senate now about FAA appropriation. that may include additional supplemental funding. And if that's the case, we'll be a little bit wiser in how we apply for that. We may throw in a project that will score much higher, like the acquisition of new snow removal equipment or something of that nature. So that concludes the report. I'm happy to answer any questions that may come up on that.
We have your manager's report?
I do.
All right.
Funny you should ask. The fuel flullage numbers for August were a little bit lower than they were for July. I think that's just indicative of the time of the year.
Yeah.
The fuel flowage fees still run about $1,600 a month, so those are nice. I did talk about the NNDA function. The California Airports Conference, I just went to one day last Thursday up there. I found it very beneficial. One for, I'm seeing some people that I see at the regional conferences, but they had some really good topics, and it also gave me some ideas about for the Nevada Airports Association conference that we have every March. So I like that, being able to interface with those neighboring airports. Truckee was there, South Lake Tahoe was there, but so those are always good to have that contact. We end up with about 37 nights of tie-down fee in relation to the air races. I don't think I'm sure that's down from last year. I didn't have a solid number to put my finger on. But the Northwest ramp was pretty full on the weekend. The South ramp didn't have that much activity. We had maybe 2 or 3 airplanes that were there, 2 over the long weekend and maybe 1 or 2 nights on the other ones. We don't really go out there to market that. So those are kind of residual happenings for us. You know, there was a little bit of conversation between Sterling Air telling people on Unicom that they have parking. And then the folks that work for Mountain West were like, your car's on this side of the airport, so.
Yeah, that's
We're
something
not gonna run your car over for you. You may wanna park over here.
I will tell you, to clarify for everyone on the airport authority, there's 2 issues. Number one, a lot of the folks who park on the south end are, they tell us they don't want to pay the $10 tie down. And I think the airport's a little less than $10 a
We're
night.
10 and Sterling's 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we tell them, look, if you go over there, it's less money. But we also tell them, you're not going to get services from us.
Aren't you, sir?
We don't have the resources to stage your cars, and the FBO's on the north side, so pick your poison. If you don't want to pay, you get the bare bones through the fence, through the gate access at the terminal, and that's that.
And then you say, don't be so cheap.
We don't know. They can do what they want.
Well, I will say that during the weekend, people can't really get in and out of the gate. It's a big problem. I mean, I probably let about 5 people into the gate. Hey, I got an airport. Well, what are you doing? What's your N number? So that is a problem that I think is going to have to somehow be solved in the future.
Well, the solution is that the FBO is, the purpose of the FBO on the airfield is for that access and services. So the south ramp happens to have some tie-down space, but you're when you're buying that, you're knowing it's like going to a campground.
That's
without
right.
a bathroom or a fire pit.
You're on your own.
You know what you're getting, and so that is an issue, and it is a security issue, as you mentioned.
No, I
as
know.
well.
They don't really know, or they should know. They should know better. But
They just don't want to pay. That's
so it's a cheapskate.
that's who it is, exactly. That's why they're.
Well, I don't feel quite as
That's
bad.
why they're going. They think that they're not going to pay. I don't know. That's historically that's what it's been.
Okay, but I end up kind of screening them and letting them in and out, and so.
There's been a lot of talk about the piggyback issue, so I want to cover that just a little bit here before, as opposed to just letting it stand as it's written in the report. The reason we started enforcing this is because we've been getting people on the airfield that have no business being on the airfield and are driving on movement area services. And movement area services are anywhere that an aircraft should be and a vehicle should not be. So with that being said, a couple of those I've seen recently, it came to light with it actually didn't even happen on a movement area, but it came to light with a vehicle and an aircraft on Charlie at Bravo. Okay, so that is a taxiway. But as we know, it's shared with vehicles. It is not my favorite thing. I really have worked hard with our planning consultant about trying to segregate in our future planning vehicles and airplanes. They just don't mix. Now granted, around the ramp areas, that's a lot more common, but people are moving at a lot different rate of speed, and there's a higher level of attention than when you get out to a taxiway, airplanes think that that's their pavement, as it is. So once that came to light, I felt like, okay, we've got to really address this. And so we did a couple things. First, we worked with Mountain West about prohibiting people coming onto the airfield, going to self-service island and buying avgas. If they want to buy avgas, they can either be escorted by Mountain West Aviation or they can buy it out of the truck. It may cost them $1 or so more a gallon, but that's not my problem. My problem is the safety and security of the airfield. So we started with that. The second piece is the piggyback rule has been adopted in the city code since 2009. We're not making anything up new, but what we are going to do new is we're getting new signage for the gates, and we're going to have some pavement markings to assist people in where they should stop. Right now, it's a very sociable conversation. I chased down several people. I pulled them up. I said, hey, by the way, this is who I am. Have you seen my email? This is also posted at the gate. Do you have any questions? And most of them go, no, I'm sorry, my bad. And it's strictly educational. I did have a couple of people come in my office and really lay into me about how I'm ruining the airport and that I'm chasing customers away. And I chuckled. I said, no, the people I'm chasing away are the people that don't belong in the airport. And if they need to access, they can go to the FBO or they can come through here and they can talk to me. The communication about how tenants work with each other, there's some confusion over that. We're not a Part 139 airport, which means a commercial service airport where you get one card in, the vehicle goes through, the gate closes, the next guy has a card he goes through. We can communicate with each other's tenants and users. So what I've suggested in that manner is there's somebody behind you and they want to come through the gate, pull up alongside them, let them come up alongside you, make sure they have a gate card. I'm not asking anybody to get in a law enforcement type scenario. And if it becomes a problem and you're concerned about it, then here's my information, contact me. We can start with that. What's the car look like? Did you get a license? That sort of thing. But if somebody goes through, and I've done this a couple of times recently where I just look, hey, got your card? Okay, great. Do you want me to watch the gate or do you want to watch the gate? Oh, okay, I'll take it for you and let them proceed on their way. What we're trying to do is to prevent unauthorized access and a safety issue. And so when people have said to me that this is ridiculous and that it's really upsetting, I remind them that it only takes one incident and then it's too late. You can't unwind that. So if we ended up with a scenario where somebody got hurt as a result of that, we're negligent as an organization. So I'm not going to wear that one. I'm going to ensure the safety and the security of the airport first. And I know it's ruffled some feathers, but I've tried to be very diplomatic about it. And I followed up with a couple of letters that I'm saying, look, you're going to make your own choice. And if your choice is that you're not going to abide by the procedure, you're choosing not to be on the airport. That's your choice at that point.
They need to keep in mind, Ken, and we support you in this effort. I speak on behalf of the authority. We all support you. They need to keep in mind, when I say they, the hangar occupants, they're not the only users on the airport.
Yeah.
Okay?
Right.
They are not the sole users. They don't comprise the entire airport. Are they important customers? Absolutely. However, there are many other users on the airport with aircraft, and a lot of the hangar owners don't even fly anymore. So,
Well, I'm sure this came up during the hangar certification, hangar use issue. And I understand that's a delicate topic. And so I think I've had very good support overall, and I've seen improved compliance. My intent this week is to send out an email thanking the tenants that, over time, we've seen a lot of improvement, and I appreciate their assistance in that. And that's the way I'd rather handle it. I don't want to be heavy-handed. only if somebody's going to force us in that box. So, but I think that was important to lay out. As far as the emergency addressing, that should have some estimates from Sign Pro here, be able to get those out to the individual condo associations and ultimately have that project underway and complete. I'd like to have it done by the end of the year. Our metrics call for a couple other pieces. You probably saw that about training with the fire department, et cetera. And then lastly, I think there's a really cool event coming up at the Atlantis Casino on October 3rd with Commander Leopold, retired, of the USS Cole. And he's, in his retirement, has become, he's an instrument-rated pilot, and he's trying to tie in crisis decision-making with aviation. But I think just in general, of the whole, what happened with the USS Cole and how that all went down, I think it would probably be a very interesting discussion. So I'm planning to attend that if anybody else would be there. I think.
I am probably going to be there.
So that concludes my report. And you should see going forward in the next report, all this relating back, not just general information, but back to our strategic plan, our initiatives.
Linda?
One question on your manager's report that you didn't cover. Was there any indication who it was that ran through the fence down at the east end?
Oh, yeah, he was cited, ticketed, and we did collect a insurance payment from Geico for the repair, and the repair is done and complete.
Thank you, Ken. Steve, your legal counsel report.
Yeah, just really briefly on that last issue on the piggybacking, I agree with everything Ken said. I've also gotten a little bit of pushback from some of the people in the airport, but I've explained to them both the incident recently of a Mercedes SUV coming nose to nose with an airplane, and my own experiences where one day I was on the airport and there was a guy in a pickup truck who really didn't know where he was going, and I pulled up next side and I said, "Can I help you?" And he said, "Well, I just thought I would take a look around." And I said, "Oh no." Well, the gate was open, I was able to get in, and so I asked him very politely to leave, and he did. But those things happen, and those are people, they may even be well-meaning, but if they're ignorant on driving around on an airport and don't realize that airplanes are very fragile, and if you bump into them, you'll cause a lot of expensive damage, it's not a good thing. And so I wanted to add that and say that I support everything Ken's doing, and I like the sign that the little sign he's put up on Arrowhead on Gate 4, that's a good sign. And then one other thing, which Ken and I both also described, is when people leave through the gate, they should wait for the gate to close. That's part of the rule too, and it's only 6 seconds. And I've timed it, it's only 6 seconds. Ken told me that, and I said, "Really, is it only 6 seconds?" It is only 6 seconds. So I can't imagine anybody who can't wait 6 seconds to make sure the gate's closing before they drive away. And so I just wanted to amplify on that. And then the other thing is the air races. If our parking is down from prior years, I didn't catch whether it was more or less than prior years, but it looked to me like the population was greater at the air races. It looks to me like the air races is starting to rebuild their interest and their participation. They've got some great new sponsors. That Still Power Tools had a great demonstration. They had a great demonstration tent with people who did log rolling and tried to dump each other into the water. It was pretty cool, and they did chainsaw competitions and axe throwing, and it was wonderful. And so I think the air race is coming back, and so I would expect that to flow through to us too. And if it isn't, that's something we probably need to diagnose. And then one last thing is, when I was talking at the very beginning about, the changes in times to the meeting and the one presentation on insurance being so long, I don't want that to reflect incorrectly. I didn't mean that as a criticism of Ken, because when you look at the other items on that, he did a marvelous job on the strategic planning. He did a marvelous job on that last item, which I can't remember what it was on the agenda, but he did a great job in the other ones. It's just that one got out of control, and it happens to all of us. We all learn from it, but efficient meetings are wonderful. And so I just wanted to make sure that you didn't misinterpret what I was saying as a criticism, because I think he's doing a great job.
John, you want to tell us about our finances?
we're 2 months into the fiscal year. Our revenues and expenses are tracking amazingly closely to our budget. And there's no significant deviations. I should note as part of my report that our specific accountant at Bullis Company, the person that keeps our books, is leaving, and we're going to get a new one over there. Don't expect that to have any impact on the quality of the reporting.
Any questions? Linda?
I do have one question. I noticed that the interest income was $1,900 in the month, and the projection had been $2,000. And I didn't think that it would get to 2,000, so I think we were a little hopeful on the budget, but I think that amount that we're getting is substantial, and that's one of the most satisfying things I did on the board. And I think that is a wonderful program, and that we should, really pay attention to how we manage it over the next few months and year.
And maybe we should, specifically state it on all of our reports as the law.
No. Thank you, but no. But I think, over $20,000 a year in interest on the money that we've put aside as reserves for our future growth is really a wonderful thing.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, if we talk about easy money being, putting cell service on our tower, this is even easier. Yeah. So.
Okay, any comments from, other comments, I should say, from our authority members? Okay, I have two. I just want to, again, thank Linda for her service. We're indebted to you. Thank you very much. And Bradley, thank you again for working on the metrics with Ken. Really appreciate your expertise. Public comment, I don't see any. And does anyone want a specific agenda item for the next meeting?
I just
Yes,
thought I
sir.
would let you know that Mr. Giangreco told me that he would be delivering a letter tomorrow to the airport manager saying that he's going to exercise the option and release the last two sections of his leasehold. I had explained to him earlier what the process should be, writes a letter, and then the lease says that he needs to do a record of survey so the assessor can split those so that we have separate lots and we can go ahead and do whatever we want with our piece, put it out to bid or wait until we think there's a market for it. When I was talking to him, in the submission that he handed out to you, I was pointing out some arithmetic errors in his calculations. And I'm not sure that he understood what I was telling him, but I'll just tell you the math is wrong. And I'm happy to explain it to you if you wanted. Yeah, but I won't go into it now. But at any rate, that will be, I expect that to be an item. I mean, we have to wait till we get the letter, but that should be an item for the next meeting, because I think what should happen is the airport authority should take action saying, we recognize that he's given it up, so that we've got some action we can show to the assessor so they remove that parcel from his ownership.
So Ken, can you take note of that and make sure that we agendize that one?
Absolutely. I just did. And
Awesome.
I want to say real quick on the Mountain View Estates or Mountain View Hangar Association. I sat with Dennis for an hour and walked through the lease, and so that we would have a common basis of facts. And we walked through the appraisal. We did all that sort of thing. It's more of a Dennis issue than it is a fairness issue, in my opinion. But at the California Airports Association meeting, there was a presentation on hangar development. There was a gentleman who has a company called Hangar LLC or something of that nature, and he's done some hangars both at Whiteman and at Hayward that he talked about. And he's talked about all the things that he looks for when he looks for a project. And I kept hearing Sierra Skyway. I kept thinking about that project. Level ground, close to utilities available, close to access to taxiways and other infrastructure. And so I spoke to him at length, and I actually shared his information with Dennis in an email. I copied Dennis on it. And he's coming up in October around the MBAA conference and making a site visit. So I'll meet with Mr. Giangreco again. prior to next month. So whether or not there may be a change in his mind or whatnot, we do have a party that is interested in looking at that area. And then lastly, I did forget something on my report. I was on as you know, I sit on the AAAE GA committee, and there was a discussion about a event in San Antonio called the National Airports Conference. Well, that wasn't what caught my eye. There's a workshop going on there that the weekend before on October 5th and 6th, and it's all about, it's called an Airport Business Management Workshop. And I looked through the agenda, and there's some really timely stuff in there, through the fence developments, hangar use policies. I can go down, there's about 14 items on there that I thought would be very timely and tie in with our strategic plan. So this is not a conference that I plan on going to or attending, but I think there's some value in the workshop. Back of the envelope calculation is probably about $1,000 cost. It would be just over the weekend, and because I don't think I would stay for the conference, which is the workshop's on Saturday, Sunday, and then the conference begins on Wednesday or Monday afternoon through Wednesday. So I think there's some value here, and I'm happy to share that with the board offline. I don't think it's anything that needs a vote or anything of that nature. I just think that there's some timely information and topics.
Everyone okay if we adjourn?
It's okay with me.
Yeah? Okay. Meeting's adjourned.